Happening. All right, we are now live for April 2021. Exciting. MacAdmin Monthly. Hey everybody. This month we're just going to jump right in. We have Eric Dreyer with us. Hey Eric.
Hey everyone, good to see you here. Good to see you. Good to be here.
Yeah. Well, here, right, in this virtual space where I don't know. I don't do the virtual background thing, so you have my actual sort of background, but
You have my real background, including the HyperCard box
yeah,
up on the shelf.
exciting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do have my working little SE30 down on the floor over there. That actually works. So
As more than just a lava lamp base.
yes, I will. I take it out and use it from time to time. There's a guy at my new gig who I have to get into more conversations with him, but he saw that on the floor and he said, "Oh, look!" And he is in this like pristine museum-like room, and he has these half-height shelves like along this one wall. So like on the floor, a shelf, and then on top of the shelves, he has the most beautiful collection of like vintage Mac gear I've ever seen as he pans around the room. It's amazing. Like, all the way from the SE up through the lampshade iMac. And it was really a trip, him just sort of like panning around the room like that and seeing all
I
these
I
things.
have fond memories of the SE30 from my freshman or sophomore year of college when I was taking Mathematica
Yep.
based calculus class. I did terrible on my first semester of calculus, mostly because I'm not so great at arithmetic. And when I'm working the problem on paper, and I make an arithmetic problem, an arithmetic error, like on page 1 of 5, that just throws your entire work off. So I dropped that class before I actually failed it, the traditional calculus. And then on campus, we had the opportunity to work with Stephen Wolfram and Horatio Porta and take a calculus class based on using Mathematica. And so we would write the calculations in Mathematica and then like hit return and see the instantly would graph, and you'd see how the curve gets towards zero but not there, and you can go back and change the formula, and the SE30 would crank out the new graph, and all of a sudden I understood calculus a lot more than the arithmetic operations that would take to get there. So fond memories of the SE30.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Because when I was in school, I have actually a similar beginning to my calculus story, which I'll share in a second because it's really, I think, nice. But so the computer labs when I was at school were a lot of PCs, of course. They had VAX terminals, and they had they called it the horseshoe because it was like this arc of SE30s, and then they had three, what were they, the big wide box. It was like the 2X or something.
2FX?
Not the 2FX. That was like the higher end version, but there was like a base model, like the 2X. And so that could do color and all the the fancy new stuff. And I do remember sitting like security through obscurity, right? I was sitting next to a music professor at the next one, and I saw him using Finale, which, if you remember at the time, was like a big deal music scoring program. And I was like, oh, wow, I didn't know we had that. So I looked on my machine and no Finale. So next time I sat at that machine, I'm like, Finale's on here somewhere, right? And yeah, sure enough, he was just hiding it from students by using the invisible check mark. All right, cool. So you could go into, ResEdit or whatever and change that, use Finale, set it back. So all right, that's pretty cool. The calculus story is really funny. I had a similar story. Like the first time I took calculus, I just did so poorly, right? Like I did okay, and then I failed, and then I did okay. So I went to my professor and I said, listen, I'd like to withdraw from the class, but I'd really like
before I fail.
before I fail, But I would like to sit in because I need it for my major. Like I'm going to retake it, but I'd like to just sit in and stay in the class. And he said, you know what? It's the 6 week mark really is just like a guideline. But as the professor, I can withdraw you anytime. So do me a favor, take the next test. And if you pass, like just stay in. I was like, okay, fair enough. So I took the next test and I did okay, but I don't think I did well enough to really bring my grade up. So I went back to him and he said the same thing. He said, do me a favor, just take the next test. Okay. So I go, I take the next test. I think I bombed it, right? Whatever. So I went back to him. I said, like, please just withdraw me now. I'll stay in class. And he said, do me a favor, just take the next test. So I took the next test and I think it was like, okay, but not great. So we had another conversation and he said, listen, the only thing left is the final. He strung me along the whole semester. And he said, do me a favor, just take the final. If you pass the final, I'll pass you for the year. But if you fail the final, I got no problem. I'll withdraw you. So like, fair enough. Thank you very much. So I go and I take the final and, you do it. And like, sometimes you just have that feeling. And I got out, I was like, man, I nailed that. And, I get my final grades and just withdraw. So like, I thought I did well, but I must have bombed it. But he was true to his word. Like I didn't get that failing grade, but he also like kept me like probably more engaged than I would have been if I was just like sitting in auditing the class, not worrying about exams. But
your audio went out. Yeah, I don't know. I was listening to the last month's episode and something weird happened with your audio.
Yeah, I've learned I really should start using these headphones, but no, it actually said mute. I don't know if I touched something. Anyway, I had to take it next semester, and of course, something clicked, and maybe having gone through it all, but I was like, okay, I did much better the next semester. Yeah. No computers involved with that, though. I think mathematics was probably a little bit just before my time. But anyway, we were talking very briefly before we went live, and it's great to see you. You're one of those people I would very consistently see at conferences throughout the year, and we kind of go back to the Macworld days, really, like
Mac IT of Macworld Expo and conference. Yeah,
it's like 15, 20 years ago or something.
San Francisco. That.
Yeah. So that was always great. And, I think from Mac IT and some events that I think like Mac Enterprise, right, did this little thing sort of like alongside Mac IT because people were there. And like, there's been this nice explosion of other conferences and events. But I think interestingly for me is, you've recently taken a role at a new company.
This is Ed. This is my first full-time job working for anyone else other than myself.
I was going to say, like, when I think of you, from way back, I always thought of like independent consultant and, trainer and training and train the trainer. And, I don't know if you've ever seen the site that I put together, MacAdmin's Info.
Yep.
But on the books list, I kind of put it there tongue in cheek, but it's really true. It was like, if you're ever lost, just go search Amazon for Eric Dreyer, right? Like,
I'm touched by that. When I saw that, wow, it broke my heart.
But in all honesty, if you want to know about Mac administration and you need a book for it, like, it's probably a Peach Pit book that you've been involved in, right?
The first Peach Pit book that I did was the 1015 directory services. And after I wrote that, and I inherited that from Michael Bartosh. And after I kind of started from scratch and rewrote that, someone said, why did you completely rewrite it? Why didn't you just update it? And my answer was, I didn't know you could just do that. I didn't know that I didn't have to rewrite it from scratch. But the luxury is that I did have the time to rewrite it from scratch because Sean Reagan pulled me aside and said, look, Eric, if you're going to do this, like, you can't do anything else. Like, don't think that you're going to be able to, do training during the day and then write the book at night, or, edit the chapters on the plane to and from a client site. Just take several months off and just dedicate it to the book. Huh. And I said, oh, okay, thanks, Sean. And he's like, no, I'm serious. And we about 5 or 6 times of me saying, oh, thanks. And he's like, no, really, I really mean it. And I'm really glad that I did, because that book kicked my butt. This is the first time that I had written an entire book. I had done some secure authentication chapters for like a 10.3 book, and knew that just one chapter took me weeks and weeks to do, and it was really difficult. And I'd get my Word documents back from the copy editor, and it'd just be dripping in red from corrections. It's just like, oh my gosh, I'm the worst writer in the world. And it wasn't that I was the worst writer. It's just that there was just so much better I could have done. And the copy editor helped me refine what I was trying to say. And they're really good at what they do, and I'm really glad that they do it. All the way to just turning in that last macOS Support Essentials for Big Sur, macOS 11. All the people on the team that helped us get through that, from Steve LeBeau, the technical editor, and Victor Gavenda, the overall editor, and the copy editors, and the people who lay it out, and InDesign, and deal with the indexing and all of that. There's so many people that touch that, and it's such a better, and even the people, that's even leaving out the unnamed people at Apple who take a look at it and give some suggestions and guidance. It's so much better than if it was just me kind of just sitting at a keyboard and writing down my thoughts. So a big thank you to everyone throughout my entire book writing career that's helped me and my co-authors get through and get a book into your hands.
Yeah, absolutely. And particularly as the cycle sped up, right? And like these annual releases are just so tough to stay on top of.
Well, and every year I think, okay, this transition is going to be the easy one. This year, it's going to be fine. It's just going to be really easy to just update them each chapter. And with this year, it was Apple Silicon, and anything with Time Machine's completely different. Yeah. If you start with the blank disk, now you're APFS instead of HFS Plus as the format. You can't use your Time Machine backup disk for anything else other than Time Machine. You can use your APFS formatted Time Machine disk for another Mac, and then it'll create a separate container for that other Mac's backup. It's kind of cool. And the whole macOS recovery, the whole startup sequence, that's just completely different. So, and we didn't have our first Apple Silicon Mac until November. And I had a developer transition kit, the DTK Mac, and that was not the same. I mean, the people listening to this podcast are watching this video in this room virtually. We were not the audience for the DTK. We're lucky that we were able to benefit from the experience that we had with that, but it was not aimed at us. It was aimed at people who are developing apps. And Victor, I know that you're developing apps, and Henry, I know you're developing apps, but I'm just Mac admins. It wasn't aimed at Mac admins. So yeah, it was amazing. It was amazing to try to update all that.
Yeah.
And a luxury, as I mentioned, that Director Services book, it was a luxury that I had those months where I could take off and focus on just getting that content updated.
Yep. Yeah, that's really sage advice from Sean. And, speaking of shout outs, shout out to Sean Reagan, because really before he went to Apple, right, he was, on the Mac IT board asking people to speak, and he was cranking out books for Peach Pit and and kind of gathering the people to go write books for Peach Pit. I inherited his Server Essentials book after he joined Apple, and rode that until Apple discontinued the server certification, and then picked up Support Essentials. And somewhere along the way, we wrote
managing Apple devices, which wasn't requested by Apple, but we said, hey, there's a need, there's a thirst out there for MDM information. I want to help my MacAdmin community understand mobile device management, understand Profile Manager as a reference implementation. So we wrote a book and a course in the Apple style, hoping that Apple would adopt that for its course. And it didn't end up working out that way, but I'm still really glad that we did that, gained some really good experience. And again, the luxury of taking the time and doing that deep dive and just learning all about Profile Manager as the reference implementation.
Yeah. So we started down this path because I was asking about your new role. So I'd love to hear a little bit about that. Like, what attract?
On March 1st, I started at Kanji.io.
Yeah.
I kind of feel like it's a culmination of my career so far, helping Mac admins help their users. Whether that's when I was doing training, when I was doing consulting, when I was writing materials, working with customers. I'm doing a little bit of all of that at Kanji. And, it's April 13th right now, and March 1st is only a few weeks away. So I'm really new at Kanji, and I'm still learning all the people and all the processes, and I'm still learning about the product. But what attracted me was first the people. I'd known Weldon Dodd for over a decade, and I'm reporting to him. And it's from talking to other friends in the industry that people are like, wait, so you're going to go work at a company where you know the person that you're going to report to and you like them and have a relationship? What are you waiting for? And Nick McDonald, I'd been working with him for a number of years, and he's been at Kanji for over a year. And so just those two people being at Kanji made a big difference. It made me like, oh, let's take a closer look at this. So the people that was kind of the first step. And then the second was when I looked at the product and I saw the new approach to solving problems. It's very different than some of the other solutions I've seen. And I really liked it. And I thought this can really help a lot of Mac admins who aren't necessarily expert in an MDM already. This can really be beneficial and help people get their stuff done so that they can deliver value to the organization in a way other than like dealing with how to re-escrow file vault recovery keys. I did a little bit more research on the company. I really appreciated their commitment to diversity, inclusion, and belonging. I'm lucky enough to be a senior solutions engineer position. So work a little bit with customers, pre-sales, a little bit of customers post-sales and escalations. I'm working with the product team, which is kind of a different situation for me. It's really exciting to see kind of where some of the new things are headed. It's just, I'm overwhelmed with how kind everyone is and how the leadership goes out of their way to acknowledge the kindness and the cleverness and the successes and the victories of everybody across all disciplines and across all teams. And it's just amazing. I'm having a really good time. And I know I'm new, and I know that people listening to this are like, yeah, that's going to wear off, but I don't think it's gonna. Based on yeah.
Great. Going back to when you started out talking about like, oh, you knew the people you were going to go work with, but I feel like through training and conferences and everything, like you probably know everybody in the Mac orbit at this point.
I do know a lot of people. A lot of people know who I am, but the amount of the growth of the Mac admin community is just astounding. Just the amount of people that are now responsible for managing Mac, for managing iPad, for managing iPhone, that don't have the same stories that we do about, here's why I love the Mac. In college, I had this formative experience with the Mac SC30 and like it opened my mind to calculate. Like, no, it's just another tool to them. So to be able to help those people as well do their job and help their users makes a big deal to me.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you're at an interesting sort of like intersection of Mac administration, because MDM has become the key to it all, really.
Yeah.
You have to rely on your MDM to do a fair amount of administration that, like, historically you could get away with rubber banding some scripts together and things like that, but now the only way you can get them onto the machine and approved and all of that is through MDM. So it is a key piece, and has to be done right.
And I really appreciate Kanji's tight integration on Mac between the agent and MDM, and how, for example, if you want to turn on File Vault, it's one piece. You don't have to cobble together scripts and profiles. It's just one piece, and you just decide, do you want to enforce this immediately, or do you want to let the user defer this for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8? How many logins and reboots do you want to let them defer that? If you're coming from a different MDM and Kanji doesn't have your File Vault key escrowed, the agent knows that, and the agent uses native APIs and native Swift to let the user know, oh, I need your password so that we can re-escrow the File Vault recovery key. And it's nice. You don't have to go get a script and put together stuff and I liked doing that with other MDMs. I really liked solving those problems. It made me feel like, wow, this is a problem, and I've solved it for a customer. I've showed them all these different pieces. I've showed them how to use some packaging tools. I've showed them how to use scripts. I've showed them how to use all these different components, and it comes together to this solving the problem of File Vault escrow key, File Vault recovery key escrow. So that was really fun. But at Kanji, we leverage the solutions that we've come up with. And so we put together solutions so that it can benefit all of the customers with just a click, so that they don't have to go through that pain. They just be like, oh yeah, here, I want this, I want that. For our auto apps, we've got 38 auto apps last time I looked, which when you say, oh yeah, I want to install Slack. Okay, well, it installs Slack, it installs the package, installs any profiles necessary. If there's a text that needs to be approved, that's built into it. It's just a click. So,
oh, wow.
Yeah. So it's, when I saw that, I was like, I got to be a part of this. So it's really cool.
Well, that is really interesting, because I haven't seen the Kanji product. I've heard good things about it. But it does sound like, it ties in to a conversation I had somewhere. I forget if it was in person or in some Slack room or something. But
if it was in the US or Europe or
yeah, but it really does feel to me that there was this sort of tightening between Mac OS and iOS, and a lot of Mac admins felt that there was not much future in being a Mac admin, right? But to me, I think there's never been a more important time to have good Mac admins that know what's going on, because it does take significant effort to have a fleet of Macs in an enterprise, secure them, and give your end users a good experience.
Yeah.
So I really feel like, and again, bringing it back to the MDM, that's such a key piece of it. And the more that your MDM can be doing for you and, making that easy, the better.
Yeah. Well, if you want to see it, Ed, you just go to kanji.io/start and get you set up with a demo. And
Yeah,
drop my name, and they'll put me on the demo with you, and we can take a look at it together.
Yeah, well, like you, I started a new role not all that long ago, and there's an MDM solution in place, and I think that is one complaint that's really sort of squarely aimed at Apple, not the MDM developers, but it is not a good experience if you have to, if you want to or have to switch MDM vendors. Like that is really a problem, because like unenrolling people is half the battle, but then outside of deployment, you can't really auto enroll people in an MDM. So now you're kind of stuck asking your end users like, please, please, please go approve this new MDM that we're moving you to. So yeah, it can be a bit of a problem.
Yeah, our goal is to make things easier for the administrator, but at the bottom of it all, right, is we want the user to have a great experience. So
yeah,
we've got some things that we used when people move from other MDM solutions that, depending on if their Mac appears in Apple School Manager, Apple Business Manager, kind of waits until the device is unenrolled and then shows the notification that asks them to enroll. But there needs to be communication. The users need to be prepared for that to happen, and that's challenging. Especially when people are in constant meetings and busy all the time, and there's never a good time to update anything. There's never a good time to reboot. There's never a good time to switch MDM solutions. And if the Mac isn't in Apple School Manager, Apple Business Manager, then waits until the Mac is unenrolled, and then it opens up an enrollment page. So again, if the user's not expecting this, then it's a support call, and it's a terrible user experience. But if the user is expecting it and knows what to do, it's the Kanji enrollment page is fairly straightforward. It walks the user through how to do the next steps. So we've worked really hard at making the user experience as friendly as possible for the user.
Yeah, nice. Yeah. I would like to see that, because I think the other thing that this new role for me that I've been exposed a little bit more to is managing Chrome OS and Chromebooks. And I really have this opinion now of like, man, if you want to have a great administration experience, roll out Chromebooks, because man, that is fantastic. How much you can easily control Chrome OS, roll them out. There's a very similar program to DEP or whatever Apple's calling it now, right?
Automated device enrollment.
Automated device enrollment. There's a very similar thing on the Chrome OS side. You buy it from the right vendor. They register the serial number. It's like sort of this zero touch, opens up, and like everything immediately gets pushed to the device, and it's really, really, really nice. But the flip side of that is, you want to have a great end user experience, you roll out Macs, right? Like right. I think that's kind of the story there, and we're seeing more and more. Just I guess it's a trend over the last 15 years that when asked to choose what platform they want, end users will still overwhelmingly choose Mac OS.
Yeah.
It's for good reason.
And another thing that I really appreciated about Kanji and made it easier for me to say yes to come work there is they're on the Apple train. We are Apple, the Apple direction, we're on board with that. So, we manage Apple devices. We don't have an agent for Windows or Linux or anything like that. We're it's Apple only. And when that we were able to say, well, that's not here's the direction that Apple is going, and we're on board with that direction. Whether it's things like SSO for automated device enrollment, and the list goes on and on about the Apple way of doing things. And I've got a lot of public work that I've done for Apple, and there's other projects that I've worked on that don't see they're not available to the public. So, I've spent a lot of time getting the Apple language down and getting the Apple message down, and helping people understand that and helping explain the Apple message. And so it's great that I can continue doing that at Kanji.
Yeah, the Apple message. Like, we all have friends who are Apple SEs or CEs or things, and they have a very specific way of phrasing things and talking, and
sure, yeah,
not giving away too much, but just sort of like trying to guide you in the right direction.
Yeah.
On a slightly different note, you mentioned joining and meeting your teammates and other people at Kanji, and everyone's been so nice. And did you have any concerns, sort of like bringing this back to the real world that we face right now? Like, did you have any concerns starting a new role with all new people in the middle of this pandemic, where basically everyone's remote and you're not going to meet people face to face? And like,
absolutely.
that makes right.
Absolutely.
That makes
I was super scared, super intimidated, all of those words. And, I kind of think back to when I had the challenge of presented to me, hey, do you want to write this book, this director services book? And it scared the pants off of me. And, the advice that some people gave me was like, be in the fear of it. Like, just, it's a challenge, but let's, you can do it. So that's kind of how I approached having a full-time job. But I also, I worked really closely with the HCS Technology Group, doing a lot of contracting with them, and just really enjoyed the camaraderie I had with Craig Cohen and Adam Carnabogie, who's also my co-author for the macOS Support Essentials books and Managing Apple Devices book, and some other things as well. Keith Mitnick and Sam Valencia, some of those rock stars in the Apple world, and Chris Holmes, and so it was great being a part of that loose knit team, or being loosely knit in that team. So I already had kind of a sense of working together towards a common goal, but now that I'm working for a company and on the solutions team, I met my colleagues that are on my team, and I really appreciate the depth that they bring to the position, and the diversity of opinions and the diversity of experience on my team, and I'm exposed a lot more to the entire sales process now, because before I would just kind of parachute in and be like, hey, this customer needs X, Y, and Z, and didn't really have much context of how the customer got there, or how the sale got made, or how this fit into the overall strategy of the company, or any of that. So I'm working a lot more closely with the sales team and the support team and the success team and the solutions team, my teammates. Not everything starts with an S. There's also the product team that I work with, and the brilliant people in engineering and operations and marketing, and like Dan Miller. You mentioned the Macworld days. Dan Miller started on the first day as me. He was the editor of Macworld magazine for a long time, and so he and I started on the same date, and he's helping me do things like submit conference talk submissions and like craft those so that they make more sense. So it's great being part of a shared goal, shared vision with all those people.
Awesome. Yeah. That sounds great. So thinking back in time, I know some people, like Mac developers, if they're working on low-level drivers or things, at least they used to sort of get this access to people at Apple, or like a lab on the Apple campus where they can go in and test stuff. Does any of that happen with MDM? Because Apple really kind of controls that spec and how it, you know, functions with their devices. Do MDM developers get any sort of like, hey, I want to test this early, or any heads up to any of that?
If I did, I don't know that I'd be able to tell you. I don't, but you know, like colleagues of mine, maybe. I don't know.
Okay.
That's a good question.
Just curious. Yeah, I didn't expect that you personally would have that access.
Now, of course, you know, I bring the relationships that I've cultivated with people at Apple with me, and that is really helpful, and I definitely appreciate that, and appreciate those continuing relationships. But yeah, that specific question, no, not. I have no insight on that. Sorry.
Okay. Well, it's interesting. It would be good if Apple would do that. I'm going to actually take this back. Someone dropped a question in much earlier and I skipped over it. So sorry, Neil. Neil was asking about the time machine backups that you referred to earlier. And he asked, didn't HFS do that multi-machine backup thing too?
Absolutely. Absolutely. But you could use that external storage device for other things in addition. Right. So if it's HFS plus disk, then you'd have just that backup DB or something. You'd have that folder at the root. And then inside of that backups folder would be a folder for every disk or every Mac that you're backing up. And then inside that Mac folder would be a folder for every volume that you're backing up for that Mac. So yeah, with HFS Plus, you absolutely could do multi-machine backup. Although the Apple Style Guide says to never call a Mac a machine. It's always computer.
True. Yeah, I'm sure you're like super familiar with the
that Apple Style Guide. Yeah, you know, things like don't pluralize trademark names with iPhone devices.
Yeah, you know, one thing we touched on as you joined the call before we went live, we were kind of talking about meeting up in person in real life, and you know, we unfortunately haven't been able to quite do that. Have you been attending any virtual events?
Not. I mean, I attended a little bit of Octane because Weldon did a talk about some integrations with Kanji and Okta last week. So that was pretty exciting. It's not a MacAdmin conference, but it was a virtual conference. And the most recent MacAdmin conferences I have not been able to focus attention on. I was trying at the last fall, I was trying to really concentrate on getting some other projects for Apple finished up at the same time as finishing up revisions to the book. And also some professional services engagements like every few days. So that was very, very busy fall. And fall is when, you know, conference season wraps up, at least.
Yeah, kind of. I've mentioned this before, but I think so Macaduck is one of those events that I have not been able to attend because the first 2 years that they ran it, it was right on my wife's birthday. And I think like the first year, they maybe were seeing if I was interested in speaking. And then the next year, they're like, hey, maybe this year. So what I want to get at is Macaduck is really good with their community outreach because they must have kept a note with my record or something. And the following year, they moved it to March. And they immediately reached out and said like, oh, hey, can you make it now? Like, oh, well, no, I actually have another conflict, but thanks for reaching out. So this year, they surveyed the community on like, hey, we're in a pandemic. You know, what would you like to see us do? We're thinking of doing it in person in November. And I wrote back to them just like, thank you for reaching out to the community. But like, as someone who would have to travel internationally, I absolutely cannot see getting on a plane to go to another country to attend this event. You know, like I can't see it. And then I think a bunch of other conferences have already said they're going to be doing their virtual thing in October and November, and there's only so much attention, right? Like any of us can have.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying this just because Matt's on the call, but I did get my tickets for Mac DevOps. So I'm really looking forward to it. Right on, man.
That's great.
Yeah.
You know, you may have noticed that at Mac Sysadmin, for many years, I had been distracted by trying to make last minute changes to the book. So I really look forward to being able to be more present at conferences. Being able, I've been at several JNUCs where spent more time in my hotel room editing and making changes than being at sessions and being at community events. And I am sad about that I had to make that, that things worked out that way. But I'm also happy that I finished the book. I like having written books. The process of writing books is really, as you know, is really frustrating and time consuming. But I look forward to being more present at conferences.
It's time consuming and frustrating unless you're Charles Edge, apparently, who just like cranks out a book a week or something. I don't know how he does it.
Oh, he just finished another one. Oh, and another one.
Yeah. No, I'm sure it's all the same amount of work for him, but he's very good at it. But yeah, I definitely understand, like, still having to pay attention to the real world even when you're at an event. I think I've gotten better with virtual events as well, sort of just like scoping out time to like, okay, do not disturb mode, not checking anything else. I'm just watching these 1 or 2 videos from this event and then, repeat during. I liked Apple's approach to just sort of like dropping videos in the beginning of the day, and you could kind of deal with it yourself, watch the things you were interested in. Matt just disappeared, but I missed last year, but I heard it was a very good experience. Like, not only were the talks good, but the content, but the experience was very good. So I'm really looking forward to seeing how that's handled. Is anyone going to be attending Penn State? That's coming up. I know they're announcing their campfire sessions, and they took a totally different approach, right? Like, they're sort of like spacing it out over the course of a week, I think.
Yeah, I plan to.
Okay. I might try to drop in. That's always a favorite of mine to attend in person, also being an East Coaster, it's an easy drive.
Yeah, that's one that I was never able to get to in person.
Oh, really?
Yep. Just like Mac DevOps, I've never been able to get to in person yet.
Yeah.
So we'll get there, Matt. We'll get there.
It's really interesting just to talk about those 2 conferences back to back, because they're both really great for sort of like very differing reasons. Mac DevOps has sort of like stayed like very focused, small, not as a pejorative, but I think that's great because you can get around and sort of meet everyone and see everyone that you want to talk to. Whereas Penn State has gone the other way. And I remember the last few times attending, it was like 650 people or whatever it is, and which is great because it's a real center where everyone's going to be. But at the same time, you just cannot get to meet everybody and see everything that you want to see in those 3 or 4 days. But both have a great vibe in their own way.
Yeah. And the single track idea with Mac Sysadmin, and how Tico was like, no, we're all in the same room. And Patrick's continuing that on. So I appreciate that.
Yeah. And that's also, I don't think he announces numbers, but usually when I start to count it, it's about 250, which is a good balance. It's a good feel,
Yeah.
where you can see everybody. Yeah. I had another Kanji question for you, but it's escaped me. So I don't remember what it is, but I'll let everyone else ask if they have other questions for you instead of letting me continue to conversation.
You mentioned Kanji was strictly Apple focused. I'm curious. I'm sure you get lots of customers who are like, well, I would use it if only you supported Windows as well. And how do you, like, I've had a few of those conversations myself. I'm wondering what your response to people looking for one solution for all platforms is.
I've definitely been on calls where customers have said that, wow, this is really cool. We want this for Windows as well. I haven't heard anyone say we can't use it because you don't do Windows as well. And the general answer is, we focus on the Apple platform, and we want to do a really good job for users of Apple devices, and we feel that focusing on Apple is the way to do that.
That's actually a really good question, because I'm curious if there is any single product doing that really well. Is there a product that manages Mac and Windows really well?
I mean, I don't think so, but
yeah.
How do you answer that question? You said that you've gotten that question. So how do you approach it?
So, I mean, it's interesting. Ed said, is there a product? There are products that manage both. There isn't one that manages both well. And really, what I've seen or discussed with folks behind the scenes who have had that problem is, like, once you decide to support Windows, the market share for that looks so appealing. Like you're chasing, much larger contracts, that even if macOS was your focus for a while, it stops being your focus.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, my response to people looking for both solutions is that the philosophy behind each is so different that you're going to end up with something that's really hard to implement well. And then, like, my personal bias is that what I just said, like the product managers for a product that are looking for both are always going to be prioritizing Windows, and once that happens, you're guaranteed to have macOS fall behind.
That's an interesting perspective, and that's really important to keep in mind. Yeah. And another piece to that is kind of getting at, well, what problem are you trying to solve? Like, are you trying to solve a problem of visibility in dashboards, or are you trying to solve a problem of just wanting to be able to click something once and be done with it? And if it's an issue of dashboards and visibility, then maybe the API can come into play, and having Kanji export out information through its API to whatever system that's building your dashboards. But that the single pane of glass phrase comes up a lot, and I think part of the danger of that is that it means so many different things to so many different people, that it's hard to answer that need. Hey, I need a single pane of glass. Well, for what? And then we can take the discussion from there. And Henry, were you good?
I was just saying, I think that's a really good point, because I mentioned Chromebooks earlier in the conversation, and yeah, it's like G Suite admin, like, it does a great job at managing Chromebooks. I've never really thought that, like, man, I want this all combined necessarily, because our MDM and agent solution does what we want on the Macs. And yeah, all of them have APIs, and we can drag whatever we want into some other way to view it.
Right. And we're doing a lot of work with the API and releasing more and more visibility of the API to the customer. This past week, like more API endpoints were exposed. So super. It's just like looking at the stuff that was available when I started on March 1st compared to what's available now. Like on March 1st, we didn't have SSO enrollment customization, and now we do. So it's like there's all these pieces that like they need to be in place, and they're getting there. So it's really exciting to see that. And Henry, were you going to say something earlier that I interrupted?
No, I don't recall it at the
Okay.
moment.
All right. Sorry to put you on the spot.
Good.
All right. Well, anyone else with questions for Eric?
I love talking about this stuff. I just get so excited. And it's so cool to be on customer calls where we're showing the product to customers, and we get to interject about, okay, well, here's this one little piece, and here's the details, and just kind of go down the rabbit hole of that, and then kind of like pass that back and like, okay, let's continue on. And but to share my excitement is really fun.
Yeah, absolutely. I got to see some of that when I was at Duo Security, because like they're making a product, and I joined their labs team, which really was like seeing something go from a seed of an idea to working with product to, the whole life cycle. And then like the engineering part is almost the easy part, right? Because then you need documentation and customer support docs and getting sales up to speed and like everything else. Like there's so much more to it than just like, oh, we built this thing, right?
Right. Yeah. And every decision you make, you're stuck with that, right? That decision is
largely
like you've it's hard to take something back. So if you're going to do it, you better do it right. And you want your support team to be able to handle that new thing that you just did. And shout out to our support team who's made up of former Mac admins. So that's really great.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, with that, I think we've covered all the topics we usually cover. Talking with you about MDM, we covered conferences. So if anyone has any other questions in general, happy to hear them. Otherwise, we've been going for almost an hour, so.
It doesn't feel like it.
I know. It doesn't. I really like, fingers crossed, right? That we're all getting back to seeing each other at, in person at events real soon. Like I'm really excited for that. And
I'm taking
really
Heather
hopeful.
to her second COVID immunization vaccination on Friday. I got my Johnson & Johnson last Saturday. So
nice.
Being able to hang out with people who are also fully vaccinated, that's super exciting. Being able to go visit family and see nieces and nephews and people that we haven't been able to hug and see is just being able to see family is exciting. Or let me put it another, being able to see other Mac admins in real life is exciting, but being able to see family is, that's, Mac admins are my family, but I mean, my actual family is, I'm just really, really looking forward to that. And yeah.
I have my first appointment scheduled for late next week, so I am excited about that. To just like this, like mentally, it's a sort of like uplifting that I know that's at least on the horizon, right?
Yeah.
So
yeah, but the numbers are still not great. They're better, but they're not great. We need to stay vigilant, and yeah, I'm glad that you're scheduled.
Yeah, yeah, me too. And I think everyone in my family has an appointment now, so like that's great. And with the weather getting nicer, that helps too, because then at least like vaccinated or not, like you can still sort of like get together with people in your backyard or something. Like we did that a few times last summer with my wife's sister and her kids. Just hang out in the backyard, sort of like a little distant,
Right.
but no one's in the house. It was nice out. I've had this little projector for a while. So last year was the first year that I bought like a real screen for it. So, we kind of show movies outside. We did what we could, right? To just sort of like have fun, whatever. Oh yeah, so I think that actually is a good segue to bringing me back to the question I had much earlier, but had forgotten. Where's Kanji based? And once we are through all of this, does that mean you're going to have to move or travel to some headquarters somewhere?
They are San Diego based and made a commitment to be 100% remote.
Oh,
so
wow.
They realized that in order to get a diverse workforce, they can't just limit it to people who have the ability to move to San Diego.
So does
right
that mean
now,
they're going to allow people to be remote, or they're going to like close down that office altogether?
People will be remote. I don't know the details about closing or any of those details, but yeah, people will be working remotely.
Wow.
Right now it's
All right.
US only, but I'm hoping for the time when we can hire people in other countries. Maybe some of the people on the screen we can grab. Yeah, I'm looking at you, and that's that was one of the things that made it easy for me to say yes to coming work for Kanji, so that I can stay near family here and not have to pick up and move. Heather works for DePaul University. It'd be difficult for her to work for DePaul from San Diego.
Right. Yeah, it's a huge piece of it. My new role is based in New York, and they're kind of feeling out what a return to offices looks like. So,
as is everyone, right?
I have to admit, like, I definitely miss getting together with my teammates in an office. Like, I definitely miss that. When I was working for Duo, I already was remote, and so pre-pandemic, I was already remote, and headquarters was, or still is, Ann Arbor, Michigan. So that was super easy from New York. Just hop on a plane. It's like an hour flight, hour-ish, right? And you just hop off. You're there pretty quick. But I really think some of my most productive times were like when I spent a week in the office around other people and like having meetings in person. It makes such a difference.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
But of course there is that balance to working remotely. It's like, okay, I got to go heads down. I'm documenting this, I'm writing this, or whatever it is, and just get stuff done. And you can reach out to people like this over video and whatever. You can do it, but it's not quite the same as gathering around a whiteboard or something and just sort of like sitting down, brainstorming,
bumping into someone. And one thing I wanted to mention was that I really liked the way you said blah blah blah, or it made me a little uncomfortable when I heard you blah blah blah, and just I don't want to set up a Zoom meeting for this little piece of feedback or this little question. So just to bump into you, makes a big difference. That being said, I've never had an office. Like I've always worked out of my little 8x8 office unless I was parachuted into a client site, to do training or professional engagements, professional services or whatever. So, I'm sitting here surrounded by all this old equipment that I thought might be useful at some point in a consulting career. So like, my 12U GizMac Xserve RAID Xserve enclosure that's sitting next to me. I've got a fiber channel Thunderbolt SAN, SANlink, a Q Logic switch, like all these books. Like I don't need any of this, but I hate to throw it away.
Yeah, I think the same thing with these old books. Like some are sentimental, sort of like in the right way. Like I still have my early Scott Canaster development, Mac development books, and like he signed one of them. So like, all right, those are sentimental in the right way. But then I have this one on like DOS interrupts. Like I'm literally like there's no situation in which I will need that. But it was like, man, that started my career. Like, but man, I should throw it away.
DOS
And
interrupts. Wow.
yeah, and I like, when
we should do a giveaway right now. Like, set up a DOS.
Who wants this thing? Who wants this thing? And I think I still have like some old book on like NetWare NLM programming or something that like, man, I just gotta get rid of it. But
I remember being on like a Hertz rental bus, like one of those buses that take you from the car lot to the terminal, and talking to someone when I was doing Mac stuff who was a Novell guy, and just like talking about like, someday like the Novell servers it's just not gonna be a thing anymore. And he was just like, no way, Novell's like rock solid, it's always gonna be here. And just like, no, it's things are impermanent. That's not going to be there. And he was just like, no way. So guy that I talked to 20 years ago about this, I was right.
I did love Novell. I did.
Yeah, it was solid.
It was great.
It was definitely solid. And you hear the apocryphal story of someone doing packet traces and like Wireshark, and like, well, wait, what's on your network that's setting up IPX? And like, well, we don't have any of that. It's like, okay, well, they do the trace, and like you go to the server room and you see this wire that's going to the drywall, and you're like, well, what's behind there? And you cut open the drywall, and there's a Novell server that's been drywalled up for the past 10 years, still running. And I don't know if that's true, but I love that story.
Yeah. I wouldn't doubt it. Like, NetWare 3 was just ridiculously solid. But anyway, if we're veering off into Novell land, that's probably
that's when the cat comes out. Cat's like, what are you guys doing?
Well, it was excellent to see you, Eric. Everyone here, miss you all. Thanks for joining in.
Yeah, it's great to see your faces.
Yeah, and we'll see everyone next month.
All right. Well, thanks so much for the invitation, Ed. This was
so
much fun. So much fun.
Good. Talk to you soon.
Y'all. Bye.
Bye.
I love you, Ed.